Picture this: an earthquake hits, or a flood, or a conflict erupts. Suddenly, homes are gone, families are scattered, and the need for water, food, and shelter is just immediate and totally overwhelming. Right into the middle of all this chaos, aid workers arrive. But how do they know what to do? How do we make sure that the help they're giving is actually helpful?
So how is all that chaos managed? Well, it turns out there's a rulebook. And together we're going to walk through it. We'll look at its plan for humanity. We'll uncover the right to dignity that really drives the whole thing, see its principles in action, learn the absolute minimums for life, and understand the powerful sphere of accountability it creates.
All right, let's jump right into that first big idea, a plan for humanity. I mean, when you're staring down a crisis on an absolutely massive scale, how do you even begin to make sure you're helping in the right way?
No, really, think about that for a second. A disaster strikes. What's the plan? How on earth do you coordinate thousands of people from hundreds of different organizations all scrambling to help at the same time without some kind of shared playbook? It sounds impossible.
Well, the answer is the Sphere Handbook. And here's the thing, it's not a law, it's a voluntary code. It's basically a global agreement built from decades and decades of on-the-ground experience. The handbook lays out universal minimum standards for how to respond to a crisis, with a huge focus on quality and, maybe most importantly, accountability to the very people you're there to help.
But to really get the handbook, you have to understand its moral core. It all comes down to the right to dignity. That's the fundamental why behind every single rule in the book.
This right here, this is the core belief. At the very heart of Sphere is something called the Humanitarian Charter, and it says this: all people affected by disaster or conflict have a right to receive protection and assistance to ensure the basic conditions for life with dignity. That last part, with dignity, that is so key. This isn't about charity, it's about rights.
This charter is the absolute foundation for everything else. It completely shifts the entire mindset. We're moving away from this old idea of aid as just giving things to people. Instead, it's about upholding a fundamental human right, and that requires a professional, rights-based response.
Okay, so if a rates-based approach is our foundation, what are we building on top of it? That brings us to the principles in practice. This is the how of humanitarian action.
So, standing on that foundation are 4 crucial pillars, the protection principles, and these guide every single action. First, do no harm, and actually go beyond that, enhance safety and dignity. Second, make sure aid is impartial. It gets to those who need it most, period. Third, you have to actively protect people from violence and abuse. And fourth, help people understand what their rights are and how to claim them.
And then, kind of wrapping around those pillars, you have the Core Humanitarian Standard. You can think of it as a 360-degree quality check. It's a framework of 9 commitments that organizations make, covering the whole shebang, from making sure the response is appropriate and timely, to having ways for people to actually complain if something goes wrong.
Okay, now we're getting down to the real nuts and bolts. Let's dig into Section 4, Minimums for Life. This is the what? The nitty-gritty blueprint for survival.
Because, what does a word like dignity actually look like on the ground? It's not just some nice idea. In a crisis, dignity looks like hard numbers. It's about having specific, measurable minimums that we know are required just to sustain life. Like this one, 15 liters. That is the absolute minimum amount of water one person needs per day for drinking, cooking, and basic hygiene. Any less, and you're looking at dehydration and disease.
Or this, 2,100 kilocalories. Again, this isn't just a random number they pulled out of a hat. It is the scientifically calculated minimum daily food energy you need to keep your body going in a crisis.
And how about this one? 3.5 square meters. That's the minimum covered living space per person you need. It's not just about shelter from the rain, it's about having a little bit of privacy, a sense of safety, a basic personal space.
So you see, these minimums for water, food, and shelter, they're not just suggestions. They are tangible, measurable standards. They are the blueprint for making sure people can survive a crisis with their health and their dignity intact.
Which brings us to our final and, honestly, maybe the most important section, the sphere of accountability. Because having a rulebook is one thing, but making it actually matter is a whole other ballgame.
At the end of the day, the Sphere Handbook isn't just some internal guide for aid agencies. It is a public promise. It's the entire humanitarian community standing up and saying this is the quality of assistance you have a right to expect from us.
And a promise works both ways, right? So the handbook is also a tool for people who are in a crisis. It gives them the language, it gives them the benchmarks to give feedback, to ask tough questions, and to hold that entire community accountable to its promise.
And that leaves us with this one big thought. When you're facing overwhelming disaster and incredibly complex human dynamics, is a handbook, a set of principles and minimum standards, is it enough to truly guarantee dignity for everyone? It's the question that drives the entire humanitarian world to keep learning, to keep improving, and to keep striving to live up to its own promise.